Well, since we have a packed schedule and we really want to be able to make sure that we're answering questions and having a lively discussion, I'm going to go ahead and get us started here. So welcome everyone once again. We're really happy to be here and excited to share all of the information that we have with you. So today we have this 2-hour window where we're going to start with watching 3 videos and then have a Q&A period until 4 p.m. Eastern time. At that time, we're going to have 2 presentations. One is about measurement. The other one is about getting institutional buy-in. After the presentations, we'll have another chunk of time for Q&A as well. Please do utilize the chat for asking questions at any time during the videos, after the videos, during Q&A. Anytime. We'll try to answer all of the questions as they come in. So, and if you're having any kind of issues, technical or otherwise, please let us know as well. We'll try to do what we can to help you out. Okay, so outside of that, I think I don't have any other announcements to make. So I'm gonna hand it over to Colleen before we start the videos to just tell us what the videos are all about.
Great, thanks. So we're real jazzed. You're actually gonna be watching 3 videos that I made with Luther Tychonievich. We're gonna introduce ourselves in each of those 3 videos. And we're really sorry about that. But so I won't introduce myself now, but the first video is just going to give you this big picture of all these changes that the NSF made in their expectations about BPC plans that are for a departmental BPC plan, or submitted to the NSF called a project BPC plan. So the first one's just an overview. Then we've got a departmental BPC plan video, and then a project or submitted to the NSF BPC plan video. And please, please, please type questions in the chat. Like Luther and I did our best with these videos, but there's just going to be gaps and things that aren't clear. And so even if you, during this video, multitask and you're like, they maybe already said this, I don't know if this is a legitimate question, just type it in the chat. So like, this is a environment where we want all those questions. You don't even have to check to see if someone's already asked it. Just ask those questions. Okay, I think that's it from me.
All right. So unless there's any questions right now, I'm going to go ahead and get us started with the videos. Everyone's okay? All right. Share screen. Let's see if I am able to share screen. Okay.
Welcome. Thank you for coming. My name is Colleen Lewis. I'm an associate professor at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign.
And I'm Luther Tychonievich. I'm a associate professor of computer science at the University of Virginia.
So Luther and I both BPC consultants with bpcnet.org. That provides a ton of resources for you as you're writing a project or a departmental BPC plan. Today we want to talk about some new changes that are impacted by a September 2021 change from how the NSF handles their project plans. So our goal is to walk you through each of those pieces and talk about the implications for you.
So let's just do an overview of what has changed. This will assume some level of your knowledge of what's already there. If you don't have that, we'll certainly have some other videos. We'll talk about what's there. So the first change we understand is that
there's a note in the chat that the sound is bad. Can you double check that you're sharing the sound and the video are optimized for sharing?
For the calls that accepted them. Now some of those will require them. So more PIs will need to write these plans. The NSF also is going to allow these project plans to come in 2 different formats, as opposed to the single format they had before. So the standalone project BPC plan is like before. It's a 3-page document that describes the activities the PIs will engage in to broaden participation in compute. However, there's also a new connected project BPC plan to allow PIs to capitalize on the material in their departmental BPC plan. We'll talk about in a moment. Departmental BPC plans may now be part of an NSF submission. They're still not submitted on their own to the NSF, but in a connected project BPC plan, the departmental project BPC plan is part of that submission. And that means the departmental plans are going to need to follow the formatting guidelines that proposals to the NSF need. And all of their content needs to be related to BPC. So there's going to be some restriction. In previous times, you could have some things in your departmental plan that was not really related to the BPC mission of NSF. That is no longer the case. To support these changes, there are new checklists on bpcnet.org, 3 checklists, one for standalone project BPC plans, one for connected project BPC plans, one for departmental project BPC plans. They're an effort to collect all of the things you should be thinking about as you're writing these, and so you can check off your work and make sure that it's meeting all of the goals. The official rules, however, are not bpcnet.org. They are the NSF publication. Each NSF solicitation will contain the official language of what they require, and NSF also has a BPC frequently asked questions page, which they will update from time to time to help clarify some of this.
So before we go on, then the next thing we're going to talk about is how people will pick between doing a standalone or connected project BPC plan. Okay, so we have a flow chart here that's also available on bpcnet.org. And the big picture questions we need you to ask is, do all PIs on the project have a verified department plan at their institution? And departmental plans are submitted to bpcnet.org for verification, ensuring they meet the requirements or the checklist there. So if all PIs on a project that's planning to be submitted to the NSF have a verified department plan at their institution, then the next question is, do all PIs on the project intend to participate in an activity in a verified department plan? So each at their own institution, they have a verified department plan. Is the activity that they want to propose in their project plan from that verified plan? If both of those are true, then the PIs are going to submit their project plan in combination with their verified plan. And so every institution can submit 3 pages. 1 page for the PI's activities on that plan, and then 2 additional pages, which are the verified department plan at their institution. Let's talk through the scenarios where we are not allowed to submit a connected plan. So if any PI is at an institution where they don't have a verified department plan, so that's if the first question's answer is no, then they need to submit a standalone project BPC plan, which is 3 pages total for all PIs. And these are actually just the old project BPC plan structure. Okay, so if any PI is in an institution that doesn't have a verified department plan, they must submit a standalone project plan. The thing is, the verified department plan doesn't have to come from their department. So maybe there are multiple PIs at my institution that are collaborating. We could all use one of their department plans, or even we could use a department plan from a department at my institution from which none of the PIs come. But assuming every PI is from an institution with a verified department plan, then the question is, well, what do I want to do as individual PIs to contribute to BPC? That's what I'm describing. That's really the goal of a project BPC plan. And if I'm selecting an activity from a department, a single verified department plan at my institution, then we can just include a brief description saying how we're plugging into that department plan, and we won't write the standalone department plan. But if I want to do something that's not on my department plan, then none of us will be able to submit our department plan, and we will all submit a standalone project plan.
Because of this, the activities on departmental plans are going to be of increasing importance compared to the other material going forward. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. So let's now talk about some specific changes to the departmental BPC plans. Because these departmental BPC plans can now be part of a connected project BPC plan, those BPC plans that contain the departmental plan as well as 1 page about what PIs are doing, there's some additional guidance and changes we need to make about those. So first, they're going to be submitted as doc or docx files to bpcnet.org for verification. And that file format is important so that we can do all the things we need to do to make sure they get verified properly and submitted well to the NSF. They have to obey the NSF formatting rules about font sizes and margins and so on, which they didn't used to have to do. The effective dates have been changed. Previously, the authors of the plan would pick their own effective dates. Now they're going to be verified for 2 years. When you submit them and they are verified, they will then last for 2 years. If the plan hasn't changed and you want to re-verify, you can just resubmit at the time, although we expect over 2 years, something about what you're planning to do will likely change. Also, every activity you describe in this plan must be appropriate for inclusion in a project BPC plan. In pre-past, only some of them need to do that. Now all of them do. So there's some various things to support that. Each of them should have an activity, some simple label we can use in that page that describes what the PIs do to identify which activity they're talking about. They need to identify what BPC goals they're intended to achieve. You have a clear description of what will occur as part of the activity, not just the name of the activity and its goals, but also what are people actually doing when they're engaged in it to some degree. And there needs to be some indication of how its outcomes will be measured. These don't have to be the final outcomes, although it'd be nice if they are, but some suggestion of how you'll know how the activity is progressing. And in general, this leads to our general suggestion. We want more focus on activities that multiple PIs can engage in. And the other components of the departmental plan probably should sacrifice some space to give more space for them.
As always, there are resources on the NSF with the definitive rules and additional resources on bpcnet.org. And then on the YouTube page with this video, we'll also paste links to other videos providing more detailed advice for creating departmental BPC plans and project BPC plans. Thanks for joining us.
Welcome to our video about departmental BPC plans. I am Luther Tychonievich, an associate professor of computer science.
I am going to stop for a moment to ask everyone if the sound quality is any better right now.
It's been okay for me.
Okay. Is there anyone who just can't follow at all?
We do have the live transcript available.
All right. Okay. Well, I'll restart, and I apologize if I can't find any setting that would fix that. All right. Here we go.
University of Virginia.
And I'm Colleen Lewis, an associate professor of computer science at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign.
We are both BPCnet.org consultants, which means we assist in helping people writing and verifying their BPC plans. And the purpose of this video is in part to explain some changes that have been made to departmental BPC plans in September of 2021. We have a separate video that overviews all of those changes and what you should know about them. That's linked below this video on the YouTube page, which you're welcome to look at. We're going to focus primarily just on the departmental plans, and in particular, specific techniques you should think about or approaches you can use to update an existing plan or to create a new plan to match the current rules for these documents.
Great. So tons of departments in the US actually already have a verified departmental BPC plan. And what that means they've done is they've written a 2-page document, submitted it to bpcnet.org. Folks like myself and Luther have gone through to make sure it meets the checklist requirements and verified it. For those people who have a verified departmental plan, this slide is for you. Let me walk you through the steps. First, you're going to copy the departmental BPC plan template from bpcnet.org. Remember, now we need to follow all the rules of the NSF formatting, the PAPPG. So that template is going to follow those rules as long as you don't change anything. Additionally, 2 pieces for working with getting it verified. One is that template includes a line for effective dates for your plan, and that's going to be filled by BPCnet staff. Additionally, there's going to be a 1-inch square where BPCnet staff will add a verified stamp, and that's included in the template. And because you're going to submit your file as a doc or .x file, they'll just be able to replace that with the verified stamp. So you'll update your header information, right? Because you've already got a verified departmental BPC plan. You're going to copy your current plan's content into the appropriate sections of the template, making sure to not change the formatting substantially so as to still meet the NSF requirements. You're going to cut goals and activities that are not focused on NSF as defined NSF defined BPC. So the NSF focuses on groups underrepresented in computing who have faced long-standing and persistent underrepresentation. And so this includes racial, ethnic groups, gender groups, and disability groups. And each of your goals and each of your activities must be focused on one of these focal groups. Each activity must additionally align with one of your goals, one of your BPC focus goals, and this must also focus on the same groups. And the key idea is that these plans will be included in connected project plans, and all of the project plans that go to the NSF need to be exclusively focused on BPC as the goal. Each of your activities and goals also needs an identifier. This can just be something like G1, G2, A1, A2, but that's going to allow your PIs to reference it. Once you've done all these steps, you're going to go through on bpcnet.org and double check that you've hit all the components on that checklist. If you're still over 2 pages at that point, we used to just tell you to make the font size smaller, but that's not allowed anymore. So now you need to, some pieces that might help you cut down text is any context that's in there that doesn't motivate a goal. And you might cut activities where it would be harder for PIs to join them. Even with 2 pages, you're not going to be able to capture everything that your department is doing. And so really maximizing opportunities for your PIs to get involved. After you submit it to bpcnet.org for verification, consultants like myself and Luther or others will review it and be able to provide feedback to you before verification.
What if you don't already have a departmental BPC plan, or you wish to write a new one? So these are some of our suggestions on how to go about writing a departmental BPC plan. First, again, we're going to suggest you copy the departmental BPC plan template from bpcnet.org, which will help you match the NSF formatting rules about line spacing and font size and so forth. You'll have a line where the effective dates of the plan will be added by bpcnet.org when it's verified. You'll have that space where the BPCnet staff can add the verified stamp when your plan is verified. You'll need to change some of that header to put the name of your institution and so forth, but not fill in the dates. Again, that'll be done by BPCnet staff. But then the next thing you're going to do is, once you've done that sort of initial checklist kind of thing, is you're going to brainstorm what the list of activities you want to include. Remember, again, departmental plans are now a source of activities for a connected BPC plan that PI will submit. And so you want lists of activities that PIs can engage in. We suggest thinking about 2 things here. First, what are the PIs that are likely to use this plan? What are the faculty in your institution already doing? What are the currently ongoing BPC activities that you could include? And also, what are other BPC activities that the PIs at your institution will find it easy to participate in? And particularly if several PIs can participate in the same activity, they'll be more valuable to you. So create this list of activities. Then you'll need to write the content of the plan. We'll handle that separately. There's a lot of things to think about the actual formatting and so forth of it. But after you've put the plan together, you're going to want to go to bpcnet.org and check out the checklist for departmental BPC plans. And go down each item there and make sure that you've met all of the things that are expected of these plans. Once you're done that, you may very well have too many pages of content, in which case you'll need to cut it down to 2 pages, because 2 pages is all these can be. And again, we're going to suggest you cut some content that's likely to not have a significant impact on the overall plan. If there's something in your context that's not supporting any specific goal, that doesn't need to be there. And if you have activities that not many PIs could participate in easily, those are going to have less value to your department than ones that a lot of PIs can participate in. Removing some of those, and possibly supporting goals and so forth, can help you shrink your plan down to the appropriate size.
Okay, so Luther left a big gap, which was write the content of your departmental BPC plan. So you've already brainstormed what activities you might include. Now I want to walk you through some of those steps. So the first piece is you're going to write goals that motivate all your BPC activities. And in particular here, we want goals and not vision. So my vision is to have an inclusive campus where which is not necessarily measurable. And like, how would I know if I had achieved that goal? You're welcome to include that visionary text, but we also need a goal that motivates each activity. So here's an example goal. I say G1, remember those identifiers. By particular date, I will have this particular measure will improve from a current value to a goal value. So imagine I was saying, by 2023, the retention among Black students from incoming majors to graduation will improve from 80% to 90%. We have a little note that also include the number of people if the value is a ratio or a percentage, because the feasibility of that goal varies if there are 5 Black students in my institution or 500 Black students in my institution. And so include that additional information in there as context. You're going to provide relevant data to each goal. Here's the get out of jail free card, which is or additional activity to collect that data. And so maybe you want to make a goal about retention, but actually you don't know your retention levels for some particular group yet. You can combine in that the goal, an activity that collects the data, and then activities that seek to improve those retention rates. And multiple activities may share the same goal, but they don't need to. I found in writing my plan that it was helpful to have goal, activity, goal, activity, goal, activity. That made it easier for me to explain what we were doing, but that is not necessary. You're also going to describe each activity. This part is really important to provide a clear description. First, you need an identifier. Again, that's so that PIs, when they put it in their connected project plan, can refer to it succinctly. It's going to have an identifier and then also a short name. It's going to have a contact person. This is really important when we're reviewing plans so that we can see that who sort of is the key contact person for each of these things. That's also important for your PIs as they're looking at their plan, your departmental verified plan, to figure out how they might plug in. Who should they contact about like what steps they could take and how they could get involved. Each activity also needs to identify what goals it aligns with. You might just say G1. It needs to include a clear description of what will occur as part of that activity. That part's really important to get right. And then additionally, how its outcomes will be measured. And say my activity relates to sending students to the Richard Tapia Diversity and Computing Conference. You could imagine that a lovely long-term measure would be, how did this conference attendance shape the experiences of my students in their career 10 years later? That would be lovely to be measured. That might not be a realistic activity to engage in that measure. And so for some of them, it might just be participant. What are the numbers of students and the demographics of the students who are attending the Tapia conference funded by our department? But the key piece is that for every activity, we need to understand how it's measured. With the stuff I have just described, that might basically fill your 2 pages. And that's really the important meat of the project plan, of the departmental BPC plan. But we also want a little bit more additional institutional context. This is going to describe your institution. For example, I work at an R1 that has this size undergraduate population, master's population, PhD population, faculty size. Some very basic statistics or demographic information is helpful, but not necessary at this stage. We just want to be able to provide your plan a little bit of context. And you can include as much of that realistically as you can fit. So it's really nice as this public document to help include in it year after year as you get it verified, the demographic data at your institution.
As you're thinking about this, not all pieces will fit exactly the examples we have here, and that's fine. For example, you could have a goal that is, we want to know what the retention rate of our Black students is. We just need to figure that out. And that's a fine goal as well, as long as it's clear that you've achieved it at some point or not. And so on, as you're designing these activities and these goals, fit them to your specific situation. And when in doubt, use the checklist to verify that what you're doing is meeting everything you need. Right, so we've talked about a process you can use to create a plan, to modify the one you have. But how do you go about making those individual pieces? Here's some advice. These are not things you have to do, but these are advice we have that I think will make your life easier. First is you're thinking about your goals. We require you to have BPC-focused SMART goals. So SMART goal is specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bounded. But you can have 1 or 2 goals that might cover all of your activities. You may have many different goals. Common ways to think about these goals is if you have some data that shows there's a BPC problem, that shows that some group is not participating at a level you would desire, make a goal to change that data. Or if you don't have such data, make a goal to collect that data and then improve it. When you're thinking about the context, we generally suggest only include what you need to include to motivate your goals. A lot of people start getting in context, they provide more and more data, and that's interesting and probably useful for your institution, but probably not the best use of space here. Also, as you're thinking about this context, When you want to provide numbers and information, that's good. We want numbers and information, but we don't want numbers or information that would violate privacy. So if there's a small number of people and giving some ratio about them might help identify a specific person, just say you've admitted that data for privacy's sake. Don't send it to us. Don't tempt us to post it on the web where it shouldn't be.
Okay, so advice for activities. By far, the activities are the most important part of the departmental BPC plan. So starting by identifying things that the department does where PIs are already involved or could be involved. There are lots of things that my department is doing where PIs are not particularly involved in it, or potential PIs are not particularly involved in it, and those can be included because they're really important to our BPC efforts in the department, but it's not the best use of space for us. Some additional ideas of things you might include as activities are BPC-focused REU programs. So the Computing Research Association has the DREW, the Distributed Research Experience for Undergraduates program that recruits students who identify as underrepresented in computing because of their race, gender, or ethnicity or disability status. BPC education, so just faculty or PIs engaging in learning about broadening participation in computing, how we address it, what are various initiatives, what are the root causes of it, just learning about that. It counts as an activity and is a great activity for any of your PIs. We can all deepen our knowledge and understanding of the context. BPC-oriented data collection. We know that to be able to make progress, we need to be doing a good job collecting and analyzing data, because if we're not looking at those data, we're likely not paying attention to potentially important metrics. And so many departments choose to have a data chair or a BPC committee focused exclusively on data collection. And so that can be a great way for faculty to get involved, even doing BPC-oriented data collection within their own courses to the extent to which the university allows that. Diversity conference attendance with students. So there are many diversity-focused conferences that additionally align with the NSF definition of broadening participation in computing, and it can be an awesome activity for faculty, regardless of their demographics, regardless if they fall into one of the groups underrepresented in computing, to join a group of students and potentially other faculty to attend one of these diversity-focused conferences. And in that, they can help mentor the students to try and understand how to get the most out of that experience. Affinity groups within your department. So affinity groups are typically student organizations or staff or faculty organizations that focus on people from a particular identity group. So there might be a Black student group on campus. And that there might be a Black student group in computing, and the extent to which faculty can engage with these groups, potentially providing mentorship, even just getting to know the students in the organization can be another great faculty activity. We have at my institution a huge BPC committee, and actually participating in that BPC committee can be a great opportunity for faculty to get involved. And for connected project plans, the PI could explain that they could join the BPC committee and then specifically what their responsibilities would be on that BPC committee. This is just a starting list of things you might think to include. Faculty might already be doing this and other things, but these might be good ways to plug additional PIs in.
As always, the NSF has the official rules of all of this. There's also many resources available on bpcnet.org with example activities, example plans other people have verified. And importantly, there are consultants that you can visit with that can help you refine and draft your plan, work on various components of the activities, and so forth. In addition, there are other videos in the series and other resources you can find linked below the video on the YouTube page where you found this video. Thank you for your time.
Welcome. My name is Colleen Lewis. I'm an associate professor of computer science at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign.
And I'm Luther Tychonievich. I'm an associate professor of computer science at the University of Virginia.
And Luther and I are both consultants for bpcnet.org that has a bunch of resources for enacting BPC change within your department, and in particular, support for project BPC plans. And project BPC plans are the ones that are submitted to the NSF for some calls for proposals.
So just what are BPC plans? First, BPC, Broadening Participation in Computing, initiative from the NSF and other groups to try to increase the breadth of the types of people participating in the computing field. There's different types of these. Project BPC plans are submitted to the NSF. They're required on some calls in the size directorate, a few other calls, optional on some calls as well. And the NSF allows project BPC plans in two different formats. One is what we call a standalone project BPC plan. This is a document that's existed for the past several years as well. It's a 3-page document describing how each of the PIs on the project, on the proposal being submitted to the NSF, the project BPC plan associated with, how each of those PIs is engaged in the BPC activities. A connected project BPC plan is new in 2021, and we have another video that talks about that you can find in the links below on the YouTube page. But these also are describing how each PI is engaged in BPC activities, but is doing it in the context of verified departmental plans. And so it has 3 pages per institution. If you have a multi-institutional grant proposal, you'll get 3 pages for each of those institutions. And 2 of those pages for each institution will be a copy of their verified departmental BPC plan. So if you go to bbcnet.org, you can find checklists for all 3 of these types of BPC plans: the standalone project BPC plan, the connected project BPC plan, and the departmental BPC plan. Again, both of the project BPC plan types are submitted to the NSF along with a proposal that you're submitting for funding to the NSF. The departmental BPC plans are submitted to bbcnet.org for verification, and they are also included inside your connected plans after bbcnet.org has verified. The official rules for all of these are in the NSF solicitations. For example, we have a link here to the core solicitation in the size project. There's also an FAQ, a frequently asked questions, that is maintained there that has additional clarification. And there are many additional resources and consulting available on bbcnet.org, where you can meet with a consultant like Colleen and myself or other consultants there to talk about your specific situation and get assistance in writing these BPC plans.
And all of that free consulting is provided by the NSF. Okay, so I want to talk about, maybe you have already submitted along with one of your proposals, say to SATC, CPS, or CORE. Maybe you've already submitted a project BPC plan. If you already have your project funded and then it had an associated BPC plan, no change is necessary, okay? But if you need to submit a BPC plan, so say you want to reuse a project plan from a previous proposal in a new proposal, here are some key things: is ensure that you have a title clearly identifying it as a BPC plan. That's a new requirement. And if you previously had a link to your departmental BPC plan, links are actually no longer allowed. And it's because these BPC plans need to now follow the PAPPG. So all the requirements for our full proposal are also true in those BPC plans. So if you previously linked to it, you can use a non-linked descriptor of how your plan integrates into your department BPC plan activities, or even just copy and paste some relevant excerpts from your departmental BPC plan, and you can include that in a standalone project BPC plan. If you're submitting a new plan, we have templates available online. And remember, there are 2 types of project plans: standalone and connected. And here's the really important pieces of information to pick which of those you're going to pick. If any PI doesn't have a verified departmental BPC plan, then all of the PIs are going to submit a standalone project plan, which, remember, just includes 3 pages total. Okay, so if any PI is at an institution that does not have a verified department plan, you're going to submit a standalone plan. And actually, the verified department plan needs to be at your institution. So someone from a different department in my institution could use the computer science department verified plan, even if none of the PIs on their proposal were from the computer science department. But at a particular institution, you can still just use only one verified department plan. If any PI is doing an activity not in the verified departmental BPC plan, then you're going to need every PI needs to submit a standalone project plan. Remember, that's just 3 pages total for all PIs. So this means the department plans are designed to provide opportunities for faculty to get involved in BPC activities. But as a PI, I might want to engage in an activity that's not listed in my departmental plan and my verified departmental plan. And as an implication of that, none of the PIs from my project would be able to include their departmental BPC plan. We all would submit 3 pages total in a standalone plan. However, if all the PIs are from institutions with verified department plans, and they all plan to do activities that are from their institution's verified departmental BPC plan, then we can submit a connected project plan. That allows us to just include the departmental plans directly, and likely just a paragraph describing for each PI, how are they going to get involved in their verified departmental BPC plan. So it likely makes it a little bit easier. And again, every institution gets 3 pages in that connected project BPC plan. Standalone was 3 pages total. Connected is 3 pages per institution.
So again, there's many more resources available. We have additional videos in this series that you can find links in the comments below the video on the YouTube page. And there are many more resources available at bpcnet.org. We hope this information will assist you as you are creating your project BPC plans.
All right. Thank you, Colleen and Luther, for the videos. As clear from the videos, and we put this in the chat, these videos are already available on bpcnet.org, which link to CRA's YouTube page. So at this point, we're just going to open it up for the Q&A. So feel free to either write it in chat or raise your hand and speak up.
This is Gang from Winnie Mary. I have a question about the departmental BPC. So according to your chart, all the PIs their institution should have a departmental BPC plan in order to use it, right? But later you also said that they can choose to use department BPC that's not from their institution. Is that right? So even though our department have a BPC plan, I can choose to use, for example, UIUC's BPC plan. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct. From anyone from my institution, a different department. So the physics department, if they were submitting to a size proposal, they could use the computer science department's BPC plan.
It has to be within the same institution. It
has to be within the same institution. And I think the other piece that I think you mentioned, maybe there was another piece of the question that I thought this slide might be useful for, but maybe Luther, did you catch any other things we might want to clarify?
Yes, maybe I'm reading several questions in the chat and verbally that just let me see. If you're doing a connected plan, okay, what does that look like? Each institution, not each department, not each PI, each institution gets 3 pages. Those 3 pages contain 1 verified departmental plan from the institution, which will be 2 of the pages, and 1 page describing each of the PI's role in the activities in that plan. And you repeat that per institution. I don't know if that answers the questions or not.
Yes, that answered my question.
Great.
Thank you.
An institution can have multiple BPC plans or multiple departmental BPC plans. So you could imagine that we have one at the College of Engineering and one in the CS department, which is in the College of Engineering, and one in the Computing and Engineering department. Like we could have 10 in our department. And any faculty for their proposal could pick a single one of those to use.
There's a question about what if the college has a BPC plan? The important thing is if it's been verified by BPCnet. So if they have a BPC plan that's been verified as a departmental BPC plan, then you can use it like any other departmental BPC plan, and the PIs can choose of those at their institution which one they're going to use.
Yeah, Carolyn?
Just for clarification, so each PI can use the institution level BPC plan or department level, but they have to specify, how they connect their activity with, okay. So another question is, what is exactly the difference between the institution level and the department level? There is 2 page difference, and besides the page numbers, what are the differences?
The departmental BPC plan at an institution, we only have departmental BPC plans that are approved, but you could have many of them. At my institution, we probably have people from 5 different departments who submit to size proposals. And so each department might have their own BPC plan that really focuses on what their department is trying to do for BPC. And so all of those would be 2 pages. All of those would be submitted to bpcnet.org for verification. And then any of them could be used. Did that answer your question?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Carola?
So I'm wondering, I was looking at the sentence that says if any PI is doing an activity not in their verified departmental BPC plan, it needs to be standalone. So how do you recommend, that puts a lot of pressure on putting together a perfect departmental plan, because if one activity is missing, then, so how should we do this? How often can we update a departmental BPC plan? What if somebody comes up with a great activity that we hadn't thought of? So, that puts a lot of pressure on this. I'm just wondering.
You can update your BPC plan. And the second piece is, in the Illinois plan, I tried to be quite general in some of my activities so that they would be a good catch-all for multiple things faculty might want to get involved in. So I have ones that are sort of very general about grad recruiting. Activities like content will include speaking at minority serving institutions and going to Tapia. And so I have big buckets was a strategy I used so that I would try and catch most faculty interest. But you can also just update it.
Okay. That's interesting. I'm just wondering, right? Because sometimes if the buckets get just too big, then there's sort of not less value, right? Like if one just sort of gets less specific. So it's sort of a little
but faculty are still going to do a specific thing. And there are many different ways we can contribute to a single goal. Say we want to increase the representation of Black, Latinx, and Indigenous people who are applying to our PhD program. If I listed 3 things with a such as, and if you come up with a 4th, I don't know. I think that's just good.
So is it okay if the activities then are not, right? Because the departmental BPC plan needs to also list potential activities. So what if I have if the project plan has the same goal, but a different activity from the one that was listed in the departmental plan? Is that a problem?
If it needs to be an activity that's listed in the department plan, if you're using it as part of the connected project BPC plan. But I think I have examples in the UIUC one with some such as's that I think would be legitimate to add other things that are in that same spirit.
Is that okay? Yeah, I'd love to put such as in all of those. Is that legit?
I think a good example is UIUC has 3 different programs that are focused on recruiting students from groups underrepresented in computing to do undergraduate research. And it's if they find some other program where they can recruit a student from a group underrepresented in computing, it doesn't matter that you're not doing the Claire Booth or Drew or whatever.
Right, as long as that's allowed. That's what I'm sort of wondering. That's why I was kind of thrown off by the way this was worded. I was like, really? Okay, thank you.
Laura?
Yeah, I just had one really quick question. Can a single department have multiple connected BPC project plans, or is there only one connected BPC plan per department?
Yeah, so say my collaborators and I are submitting a grant to the NSF, and we're all at institutions that have a verified departmental BPC plan. Every institution gets 3 pages. So say Luther and I are collaborating. Luther's at UVA, they get 3 pages. UIUC gets 3 pages. And so that will contain a single department plan and 1 page describing how the PIs will involve for each of our institutions. And so that gets submitted as a single supplementary document that would be 6 pages, but it is just 1 document for a single principal. But say 2 other colleagues of ours at UVA and UIUC are submitting to a different solicitation, they would have do their own thing. Did that answer your question, Laura?
I think so. Yeah. I'm just wondering, like, if I, let's say I have two PIs working on an NSF proposal and I have another two PIs working on a completely different NSF proposal. Can they put together different connected BPC plans still within using our department plan? Okay. That's what I thought. I just wasn't 100%.
Oh yeah, totally.
Okay.
Gang?
Oh, yes. I actually have two questions. The first one is that, for example, if a PI chooses to use the Departmental BPC plan, says, I'm going to participate in the activity 1 to 3. Now, that doesn't use that as one page. You still have something his own he wants to put. Can that still be in that one page?
Yeah, if they are proposing to do so, if they're submitting a connected BPC plan that includes their verified department plan, they can't say that they're going to do an activity that's not listed in the department plan. Otherwise, they would need to submit a standalone project BPC plan, which that NSF supplementary document will be 3 pages, no matter how many institutions. So no, they can't add an activity.
Okay, it has to be within that scope from the departmental. Okay, my second question is a little bit more detailed. We have a committee, we already started to write our departmental BPC plan. We found that definition of the of underrepresented groups is a little bit different from other places. For example, it includes the students with disabilities. We have a committee member looked into the database that's referred to from the bpcnet.org. So we didn't find that. I just want to double check with you expert. Is that available? Otherwise, we may list it as a go, or I don't know whether that's available or not.
And I think data collection regarding disabilities is quite tricky at our institutions. And there are still really meaningful activities that we can engage in, even if we don't know the total number of students that we have involved. Access Computing at the University of Washington has a lot of great resources. For example, the extent to which our faculty are all using docs that can be read by screen readers could be an activity that we engage in, even if we don't know the total number of our students who currently or in the future will use screen readers. So I think part of your question, and you also, yeah, Luther.
I'll also add, you don't have to address every group that's covered by BPC. It's great if you do, but you're welcome to say, we don't have data, we don't have resources to devote to such and such a group right now, so we're going to focus on the others in our activities. That's also
let me rephrase my question for make it more clear. For example, we already get some number for the context part. Like what's the total underrepresented groups on campus? That's 16%. But that number we got from the institutional research doesn't have people with disabilities. The NSF one has that. So we don't know whether our number is accurate or not, and we don't know what to do on that.
Yeah, I think if you define what groups, so it's 16%, and this is students who identify as, and then list any group that would be included. So people who identify as African American, as Hispanic, as Pacific Islander, as Native American, as Native Alaskan, as Native Hawaiian, like that's the group. So as long as you define who are you counting in that 16%.
So my understanding does not have to be exactly the same group as NSF defined.
Correct.
Okay.
And Mark, one of the checklist items you'll see for the departmental plan is you tell us what the groups are you're talking about.
Right. Okay.
I'll also comment, if you have some group you're interested in focusing on and you don't know the numbers, just mention that you don't know the numbers. Right? It's still context, it's still useful information.
Right, but in that case, I don't know whether the context, the number, the goal is said whether it's based on accurate data or not. That's our worry. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
And if folks don't know Access Computing, Burçin pasted the link in the chat. They've got a lot of great resources. Team, a misconception that one of my colleagues had was that they thought that there were like cookie cutter things that they had to do. And I was like, no, we can find BPC activities you are interested in doing. We can align these with your interests. And I think that's an important message for us to communicate. It can, one of my colleagues is leading a book club. They have books they want to read, and then they discuss them with other people, and that's their BPIC activity because that's what seems fun to them. Kang?
Yeah, since nobody asked questions, I will take the chance. I read some accepted, verified BPC plan on the bpcnet.org. In terms of format, I do think there are some variations, not strictly following the template. For example, kind of put my departmental or university logo 0 here and there. So do you have any, I don't know whether we have something more specific to say what is okay, what is not.
Two things there. First is the formatting rules became more strict in mid-September. So if you see of this year, so if you see something verified before that, there will be a lot more variation than is currently allowed because it's now required to follow the NSF's PAPPG guidelines. The other thing is that within those guidelines, which give you rules about font size and number of lines and so forth, and the BPC net rules about how the verified where the verified logo goes and so on, you can format the rest of the document essentially as you wish.
I'd also like to point out that in the verified plans page, there's a table. You can sort by the column plan uses 2021 BPC plan guidelines, and the ones that say yes are the ones that use the latest formatting. So those would be the ones I would suggest you look at as far as formatting guidelines, but the other ones are also great resources as far as activities and other content.
And I pasted the link to the table that Evelyn just mentioned. Anu?
Hi, I know this question was discussed a little bit before, but the part I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around is with over 30 faculty or, in our department, and we're limited in 2 pages to sort of capture everything that everyone might be interested in doing. And then it's, I understand coming up with these large buckets, but then I find myself sometimes when collaborating with others outside of the institution and on different types of projects, sort of our BPC activities are very different and kind of focus around what we're trying to do with those projects. And so I just am having a hard time envisioning how do we kind of capture all of the what ifs in 2 pages. It seems really difficult. And I know you guys have the examples up there to look at, and I will go through and try and find these broad categories. But I guess the question was, I forget who it was asking earlier, but it almost feels like by making these activities and goals so broad, we're kind of losing some of the value of it by making it so broad and how we would describe it. I'm just not sure if I'm thinking about it right or not.
So there's several parts to this question. Let me give just one little piece. Okay. One thing that we did at UVA when we were designing our departmental plan is we created a list of all the activities we were engaged in or interested in engaging in. And that was a 7-page document. Wow. We then went through that list of activities and picked out the subset that we readily imagined multiple of the PIs in our department wanting to join, because those are the most useful for the purpose of creating connected project plans. And so those are the ones that we devoted space to in our departmental plan. And then that allowed us to use that for connected plans. And there are people doing other things. And if they want to put that on a proposal, they can write a standalone plan for it. Right? That standalone plan is always an option. But we found the departmental plan was most useful to get these things that we expected multiple people in the department to be collaborating on and other people to be joining.
Yeah, and I found that, we have over 100 faculty, and I had space to spare using the NSF PAPPG. So if you see the UIUC plan and you think a faculty might want to do something that Colleen didn't list, please tell me, because I want to try and talk faculty into doing it. But I was able to list literally everything I could imagine a faculty member getting involved in. And so And when you read it, are you like, wow, this is a concise description of this activity? Like a lot of information is missing. Do you know what I mean? In terms of like really what it's about, like that's true. Do you know what I mean? But I would love it if people had more ideas for things I could add to my plan that faculty might want to get involved in. And in the future, if a faculty member finds something, I'll add it and get it re-verified. But
so just a quick follow-up question based on what you just said. So our departmental plans are supposed to be, I guess, really broad to kind of capture everything and the goals of what our department wants to do. But then when we put the one-page activities that the PIs in particular are doing, that's where we can sort of add the detail of the activity itself.
Yeah, super specific. Okay. Sure. We're doing the BPC Education Book Club. We are going to meet 6 times this year, 5 times next year. We're going to meet over lunch. Do you know what I mean? Like we're going to take attendance at who's there. Like there, you can really have more detail, even still in just a paragraph or something. But it's,
okay.
Yeah.
That helps. Thank you.
Yeah, Julie?
Hi, my question actually relates somewhat to Anu's question as well too. So I'm wondering if you have any sort of recommended process. Like I can imagine defining one, I'm a department chair and I can imagine defining one that's like more top down that has all these things in it. But do you have any sort of best practices or processes that sort of do this more democratically or generating from the bottom up about the types of activities and how to kind of get that through the department in a kind of more bottom up way? I don't know if you have any best practices around this development.
Yeah, one of the recommendations we have is sending out a Google form or a Google spreadsheet where you say, hey, what are all the things you know about that are happening on campus that you might want to get involved in, or all the things that you are already doing or are interested in, so that you list those by name so that faculty see themselves in your plan. I think one top-down thing that was really helpful for us at UIUC was having the department chair say in your annual report to the department chair, you will say whether or not you have learned about inclusive teaching practices or integrated inclusive teaching practices or mentored undergraduate students. And so we are able to have that top-down piece of evaluation make all of our goals make more sense, because now our goal is about faculty adopting inclusive teaching practices, and we can set targets for that because top down, our department chair was willing to have every faculty report this.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Since we have a break in the questions, we can move on to the next part of our working session with the presentations, and we'll again get more time for Q&A after this. I also want to note that we recognize some of you might have already seen these presentations before through other workshops that we have already had within the past year or so. So if you have seen the presentations, or if you have specific questions about your plan, or whatever the case may be, we will have some breakout rooms, and we have a lot of BPCnet consultants who are here with us today. So they'll be able to join you in a breakout group to answer your questions today. Or of course, you can always make an appointment, even if you're at the presentation today, we can always make an appointment on bpcnet.org to meet with the consultants. But I want to point out that there's an option to do that today as well. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Tracy, I believe is here.
Yep, I'm here.
All right, to begin our presentations today. Thank you.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to the workshop today. So I do want to stress this is a presentation that I gave during the previous couple workshops. So if you have attended any of these workshops, feel free to jump into a breakout room and get some one-on-one help from one of our fantastic consultants. Okay, so I'm Tracy Camp. I lead the department at Colorado School of Mines, which we call CS at Mines. We are growing just like many other institutions in our nation. We're growing fast. We don't have enough faculty. We're all very tired, just like I think most of us are. So the good news, though, is with our growth, we were able to leverage the growth and really change the demographics in our department. So this slide shows our undergraduates increased over 6 times in a 12-year period, but you'll notice that the number of women increased 13 times, and the number of students from other groups minoritized in tech increased 15 times, where AHN stands for African American or Black, H is for Hispanic, and N is for Native American. By the way, in case you're not familiar with this minoritized in tech terminology, which I wasn't until pretty recently, it's a replacement that some are suggesting for underrepresented groups to make it clear that many in our community have been pushed to the margins of tech, often without their desire in being pushed. So this large increase in the number of students coming from those groups really changed the demographics in our department. As you can see here, we more than doubled our percent of women and other students in the AHN category. Now, you may be thinking 22.9%, that's not much, but you really need to keep a university context in mind. Overall at Mines, we have slightly under 32% women. So we are at about 75% of where we need to be to reach parity for women at Mines. Now, I'm showing these numbers partly to brag because I'm really, really proud of all that we have done within CS at Mines. But more importantly, I'm showing them to prove to you that it is possible to make good progress along the way. You can create these changes for your department as well. And now notice, I'm not going to give you our numbers for graduate students. We have a lot of work to do at the graduate level, so there's nothing there to be proud of. But even at the undergraduate level, we still have a lot of work to do. There's always room to be room for improvement. So let's take a look at what we did within CS at Mines really quickly. So we did a lot of things. We have recruitment activities, we have retention activities, we have activities to ensure our student experience is positive for all students. If you have not seen or heard of this document from NC WIT, there's a multi-page document that you can see the title there. And we've done 74 of the 81 suggestions in that document. Some of the suggestions are real easy to implement. Others take a lot more dedication, but you may want to check out that document. But anyways, the main thing I want to stress in this presentation is one important thing that we really learned in this journey of changing the demographics in our department is we started paying more attention to our data and measuring where we are. A measurement or evaluation of your situation is imperative in order to move forward. If you think about it, you need to measure your data to understand your situation and where your problems are, and then you can be strategic. But if you don't know where you are and where your problems are, then it's hard to be strategic. You're just kind of throwing darts at a wall, hoping to hit on on something. Okay, so let's talk about overall process. So in previous presentations, previous workshops, we had a session on each of these pieces here, 1 through 3. But if you think about it, they're all really closely tied together. You need to first determine your context within your institution and set goals. And those who know me, I'm really big into SMART goals. You need to set SMART goals: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. So set SMART goals. Then, after you understand your situation from looking at your data, then you can start implementing activities strategically. Then you need to measure how you're doing. Then you need to loop back up to the top. So it is this process that just goes on and on. So let's talk about measurement in a little bit more detail. So the bpcnet.org website has a plethora of wonderful resources for you. So we're going to take a look at underwriting resources, customizing your BPC plan. You'll see that there is a section for data and evaluation and measurements. So in the rest of this talk, I'm going to quickly go through each of the things that are there and give you a few thoughts on those areas so you can see what's available and perhaps use some of this in your own development of your plan. So let's start talking about what is publicly available data. So this is data on a national level. So lots of national data is available that is linked from that webpage that I just showed you, which allows you to compare your demographics at your institution with data for everyone. So that can be valuable. So you could take a look at the IPEDS data. NCWIT has a great scorecard on industry, academia, and K-12. There's also, many of us use the Talby survey, so that data can also be valuable. So all of these publicly available data sets are linked from the bpcnet.org. And I highly encourage you to check out the tool that is on the website. Colleen, you know the tool I'm talking about, or Evelyn, could you put a link into the chat? Evelyn created this awesome tool that all of us can benefit from. So I encourage you to check that out so you can see your data as well as data in your state versus data in the nation. All right, so let's move on to the second piece that's available on the website. So as we were talking, it's really important to measure your own data. And so you want to look at institutional data. So what data should you get from your institution? You can imagine there is a lot of data you can collect from your own institution. So let me just give you a few things that you may want to take a close look at. So I highly encourage you, if you haven't already, talk to your admissions office or whoever handles your applications to your department and get data on applications, acceptances, and enrollments, and study this data broken down or where it's separated by both gender and racial ethnic groups. So then you can see, for example, whether you have a recruitment problem into your computing degree program. You'll also want to look at data for retention and attrition within your program to see if you have any issues there. And of course, you want to separate this. You want to look at both undergrad and graduate data. So let me give you an example of something that we noticed within CSAT lines. So when we looked at this data on acceptances and enrollments, we learned that approximately 21% of our acceptances to our undergrad major went to women, but only about 17, a little under 17% of the students who enrolled in our program were women. So we definitely saw that we had an issue there between the acceptances and the enrollment. So that was clearly a problem. So we thought about a strategic activity right there. What can we do to try to fix this problem? And what we implemented were Zoom calls between current women in CSAT mines and accepted women in 2 CSAT mines. And then the year following, we measured our data again, and we saw a big boost in the enrollment of students. And so now we continue to do those Zoom calls. The point I'm trying to make here is that we measured our data, we saw a problem, and then we strategically implemented an activity to address that problem. So that's the kind of the key point of this talk I want to get across. I also encourage you to take a look at your DFW rate. You know, what is the percent of students of grades in a given course, especially the low-level courses where you have the percent of students who are earning a D, F, or W, and then look at that, again, broken down by women and racial ethnic groups. If you do this, you might really learn something valuable about one of your courses. So clearly, there's a lot of data that you can monitor at your institution that I'm encouraging you to monitor at your institution. And so you may want to look at having a data chair who is in your department responsible for tracking this data for you. So we have a data chair within CS at Minds, and this person actually, this is his individual BPC plan that he uses in his NSF proposals. He talks about being the data chair for CS at Minds, and I know other institutions have done this as well. So the last category on the website that you'll want to take a look at is the evaluation or measurement of data. And this is specifically for your BPC activities. This is a huge area and totally depends on what activities you decide to implement. So let's take a look at a couple really quickly. So first of all, you might want to evaluate what your students think of your program. And again, separate the survey data by gender, ethnicity, and race. So one big shout out, I encourage you to take a look at the CRA Data Buddy survey that you can get from CERP, the Center for Evaluating the Research Pipeline. So many people on this call actually work for CERP at CRA. So I encourage you to check out this great resource. It's a free resource, whether you're a CRA member or not, you can use this resource. And the cool thing is if you participate as a data buddy, you get a customized report so you can see how your students responded to a survey compared to students at structurally similar institutions. So it gives you great data, such as, for example, overall satisfaction with your computing program and students' thoughts about leaving the computing major, broken down by gender identity and racial ethnic representation. So they provide a lot of data for you, and they let you know if any of the results are significant, statistically significant or not. So for example, at Minds, a few years ago, we learned that women are less likely to consider a PhD and more likely to just strive for a bachelor's degree. So this, was not good news, kind of made the faculty a little sad, but it was good to know this because then we were able to reevaluate our message to women in the department about PhD programs. Another benefit with being a data buddy is you can pull out the good news within the report and then share it with your dean to brag about your program. So we do that at CS at Minds. So NCWIT also has a student experience of the major survey that you can download and then massage it however you want. Just pull out certain questions that you're really interested in understanding what your students think, perhaps their thoughts on the culture within the department or their experience within your program. So you could take a look at that. You also want to maybe think about what you can do for faculty in terms of climate and culture within the department. NCWIT has another tool that could be useful. So you might want to watch for the GPS tool, and you can see on the slide there what that tool will do for you. I haven't checked that out yet, but definitely plan to at some point. Berkeley also has a self-assessment that's available, and page 23 of that URL is this self-assessment that you may want to check out. Okay, then lastly, NCWIT has this large document, user-friendly handbook for project evaluation that you also might want to check out if you're unsure how to evaluate your activity. Oh, I said lastly, but actually there's one more new resource available from NCWIT, which is this course on a specific module on evaluating your diversity and outreach efforts that you may want to take a look at. So one example, if you're thinking about maybe faculty, maybe you want your faculty to do implicit bias training. And so what I would suggest in that case is figure out how many faculty in your department currently have done the training, what percent, and then set a goal for what percent you want to get to and when you want to get to that goal. And then you can measure and track how you're doing on that specific goal. So in closing, evaluation and measurement needs to be a continuous process that you are working on through your BPC efforts. You should not assume that an activity will work the way you think it's going to work. So that's another reason it's so important to evaluate. And yeah, I think that's all. So those are the areas that that is the overall process that you want to keep in mind as you're working in this area. And we are going to stop at this point as far as doing questions right now, although I know chat has been booming. So hopefully some people have answered some of those comments. But instead, right now, we're going to turn it over to Manuel, who's going to talk about getting departmental buy-in, and then we'll open the floor up for questions for myself or Manuel. So thanks for listening.
Thank you, Tracy. Really quickly, my name is Manuel Pérez Quiñones. I'm a member of the BPC Net Steering Committee. I think that's the official title. And I'm a professor at UNC Charlotte, and I've been working on a lot of different capacities on diversity initiatives for a long time. I want to talk today, this presentation was originally made up by Dr. Ron Metoyer, and I've sort of changed a few things. So you might have seen this talk before, as Tracy mentioned on hers. Feel free to drop questions on the chat and we'll answer them at the end. Next slide, Burçin. So one of the things that happens a lot in this work in diversity is that you're going to get people that will push back. And honestly, my experience is that a lot of the people that push back, they push back out of being uncomfortable talking about issues of diversity, being sort of having heard the wrong ideas about diversity. They think you're going to water down the department or you're going to, make quality less. So I think you need to go into this thinking ahead of time, what are the barriers that I'm going to have to face so that I can convince the department to move forward on this topic? And every institution is different, in different contexts. If you have an institution that has a lot of Latinos in your campus, then maybe you use that as a leverage to convince people that you need to be more inclusive beyond just the ones you have. If you're an institution that has very poor diversity, then that might be the catch to use. So you need to sort of anticipate what is it that is going to be the obstacle for you to have the conversations and move the effort forward. Next slide. So one of the starting points often is we tried that doesn't work here, or people that were offended because of something that was said at a meeting, or some activity that just didn't work out like the way you wanted it. So it's important to sort of ignore that history. Well, maybe not ignore, but try to avoid that history. Try to not start something that ended up in a faculty meeting fight 2 years ago, because that's just not going to be a good productive place where to start. So try to find a way to start a conversation from a positive place. A gotcha that happens a lot is in the language that we use. Sometimes we inadvertently use a language that is based on deficit. Oh, these students are not prepared. These students are not smart. What is it that we need to do to get them to graduate? That's the wrong way. Start thinking about from a positive, from what do these students bring and what are they missing that we need to complement to make them succeed. You also want to sort of appeal to the faculty to want to do better. And I think I firmly believe this. I think most faculty want to do better. They just sometimes don't have the language. They sometimes don't understand what BPC is and all that. I think I'm seeing a big change in the last few years, that a lot of people are more aware of the problems. I don't know how they weren't aware before, but they're aware now. So I think it's an opportunity to say, yeah, can we address that? Can we solve that? So so you might want to leverage the climate today. I know it's toxic in some way, but it's also an opportunity for a little door opening of saying, we need to do better, and everybody's like, yeah, okay, let's now take advantage of that. Next slide. Getting buy-in is tricky. I think some of you in the questions earlier mentioned that you were department head. So if you're a department head, you have a position that you can try to leverage from sort of top down, although it's just department head. You really want to try to build consensus and try to move the group forward as a team. Not everybody's going to be on board, and not everybody's going to be on board at the same level of interest. In one of the slides up ahead, there are ideas that you can do very small things with some people that are pushing back against, many activities in the domain, and then take big activities with others that will move the effort forward. Everybody feels included without making some people uncomfortable having to do things that they're not comfortable doing. So you want to try to find consensus. You want to have a way that everybody buys into the goals of broadening participation, but not everybody's going to do the same level of involvement in the activity. So you want to have activities that are simple. You want to have activities that might be just minimal, so that those people that are uncomfortable can participate. And you also want to have the ability to have far-reaching activities that the diversity champions in your department can move forward. Keep everyone involved. I mean, this should not be something that is happening in a committee, in a corner, that you get a report at the annual retreat. This should be something that should be part of the departmental conversation, as regular as you talk about our curriculum or our faculty hiring and all the other day-to-day operations. I've been saying this a lot lately. Diversity is an asset to your organization, and any asset requires maintenance, management, operation. So you need to do this on a regular basis so that people are considering this as a day-to-day part of your activities in the department. Next slide. And I'm going to reiterate what Tracy said already. Data. I'm going to say one thing slightly or complementary to what she said. I would focus more on data to identify your problems. I would, particularly if you're starting in this domain, I would not go at it thinking, well, was that mentoring program this thing that we need to do? I want to know if it was effective. That is important as a way to sort of make the mentoring program better. But what you want to know is, what are the holes that we have in supporting students from different backgrounds that will get in the way of diversifying the program or broadening participation? So use your data to identify your problems, to identify your gaps, to identify your needs. And you can continue doing that year to year. You can evaluate your mentoring program, your advising and all that individually, but I wouldn't put the BPC effort there. I would put the BPC effort in assessing climate, in assessing students' participation, engagement, DFW, graduation rates, all these other resources Tracy mentioned. I'll echo them. They're fabulous. They're fantastic. We use the data buddy here. I think it's got a few questions on climate, and we use that in another national survey. And we use that as a way to measure the climate as the students perceive it, rather than do our own instrument. We just, we're already participating in these things. We get that data. So IR is a big source of information too. They tend to be sort of like a year behind in terms of having the data cleaned up and available. But it's also important for you to see long trends, because they tend to do the same data collection every year, and it's institutional data. Nobody's going to argue with IR numbers. You pull some of these other ones, and you're like, where did you get that data? Do you trust that data? It's IR. It's the blessed organization inside of the house that gives you numbers. So you use that as sort of a long-term trend. And the data coordinator is essential. I mean, this is not something that somebody does on a Friday afternoon after all the meetings are done. You really need somebody to be managing and looking at this information and keeping track of trends over the years, so that you can get a better sense of your climate. Next slide. This is the Barbara Ryder was the department chair of Virginia Tech when I was there, actually, and she required in your annual report a report of your diversities, your BPC activities. It was the department chair's report. It wasn't the annual report that the university required. It wasn't the thing that the personnel committee evaluated for tenure. It was personal requirements. And on your report, you need to comment on this. And the letter that she wrote to evaluate us included a paragraph assessing what diversity activities we did. And the first year, a lot of people said, well, I don't know what to do. What did I do? And so she came up with a list of activities, and I believe the document is linked on the BPC net. Some of them are really tiny things. Go give a talk at the women's dorm for engineering. And some of them were large activities and have a heavy commitment. And that made a big difference because people did not have to think deeply about what activity am I going to do. It was more of a menu. So I'm going to do this one. And it allowed them to get engaged in a rather easy way. The activity was already organized. It was all set up. So when it's a Thursday, I'll go to lunch and talk to the female freshmen from engineering. And it allowed for more people to get engaged, and it allowed for more conversation. And it actually changed the culture in the department. So think deeply how to do that. It'd be great if you can include it in promotion and tenures, but that's a long-term battle that might have even state implications. If you're a public institution like us, that could be a very difficult conversation. But there are ways that you can incentivize this. You can incentivize if you can talk to your dean. I've been told that this is the kind of activity that deans like to fundraise for, because it's really easy to say, give me a little bit of money to support diversity activities, and donors like that topic. So you might be able to pay for an extra conference travel on people that participate in activities at a high level. Next slide. You're going to find a bunch of other obstacles. There are admissions sometimes doesn't want to cooperate. There are at Virginia Tech, the freshmen, computer science moved into engineering at one point. The freshmen were a hands-off group. We were not allowed to talk to the freshmen until they declare a major. So we couldn't do anything. We couldn't recruit students. We were only allowed to participate with the freshmen during the times when the departments were allowed to recruit computer science or, for their own major. So sometimes you have those sort of local restrictions. I find that here at UNC Charlotte, retention is a lot easier than recruitment. Well, actually, there is no effort in recruitment because we have a ton of students that come with very broad, diverse backgrounds. So at Virginia Tech, recruitment was a challenge. So in your context, you might have some of these activities be more appropriate than others, and that might make it easier to sell it to the different constituents. State and legal restrictions are critical. Please know what they are. They're bound to stop everything you're trying to do if you use the wrong thing, the wrong language, the wrong terminology. We find that the race and gender sometimes evoke people to push back. But if you talk about students underprivileged or first generation, that's a language that is a little bit more inclusive, and it flies fine under the radar. So you might want to have to use those conversations, might have to figure out the legal language on your campus so that you get buy-in from other units on campus. Next slide, I think this is the end. Yeah. So I think we're done, and we'll take questions for Tracy or for me.
Yes, thanks, Tracy and Manuel. So yes, we'll open the floor to questions again. We have a question from Gary, actually. Do you control undergraduate admissions to your department? I think, Tracy.
We do not. Yeah, we do not. It's all done through the admissions department. But fortunately, I have a really good relationship with admissions. I take the admissions director, out to lunch every now and then to help ensure the strong relationship continues. And so they work with us to help us make sure that we're recruiting the types of students that we really want to make sure we're recruiting, making sure our doors open to everybody.
I think the next question, Jeff Forbes, you might be the right person to ask. How does one get the BPC budget approved? So I have a recently awarded grant with a pre-2021 BPC plan that had a budget, but we never heard back about it. So we don't seem to have budget, it seems. Are you follow up with your program officer?
Yeah, I would say follow up with your program officer. You know, as we've said before, we encourage PIs to select activities based on their potential impact rather than their cost. So the cost of the BPC activities are separate from the overall limits. If you need more budget for your BPC activities, you can ask for it at award time. And I think Colleen said that very, very few people do that. But that is something that should be possible. So I would, start with your program.
Get that money.
Yeah, get that money.
And congratulations on the grant. And
you have your hand up, I think.
Hanu?
Hi. Yeah, I had a question regarding graduation data, and I'm just curious if other people have had this issue as well. So our university, when it reports like retention and graduation data, it's all cohort based. And so let's just say 1 year we had 100 new students that started as first-time full-time freshmen. And when they report the graduation rates for like 4-year graduation rates, if they started out as CS majors, they are just saying whether they graduated in any degree and not necessarily in computer science. And I didn't know if that's what is happening like at most institutions. It has taken many, many years to like build up relationships with our institutional research office to try and dig down to get like fine detailed data on how many students are actually graduating with CS degrees out of that initial cohort. And I'm just curious, like when people are reporting numbers, are they reporting just on that public data, or do you see that it's the actual data? Because those are not consistent from what I've seen.
so I'll go ahead and jump in. So we do not list our 4-year graduation rate in our departmental plan because I don't trust what our office tells me it is. It makes no sense to me what they tell me it is. And whenever I ask a question, they can't seem to answer it. So I totally commiserate with you. I don't trust it. I don't trust it. I don't understand it. And yeah.
It seems to be the same with even the retention data, like the retention and progression. It's not necessarily that they are still CS majors, but that they're just still at the institution.
Yeah, so for retention and attrition, we track that internally within our department.
Okay.
And my IR office will break it down by departments. And so they will give me CS numbers, but I don't trust them. And when I ask questions, they can't seem to explain why they get those numbers. So, so retention we track within our department because I want to see who's leaving our major. But as far as the 4-year graduation rate, I just kind of gave up on trying to understand that.
I'll add one to that. We had an effort here on campus a couple of years ago on student success to standardize a little bit of how we were looking at the data, and the reports that are coming out now have 4 and 6 years, and they have graduation. And in terms of retention and graduation, it gets reported in 3 columns. From the department, meaning original you started and graduated. From the college, meaning you started in the department, changed to another department in the same college and graduated. and from the university, meaning you transfer out of the major into another college, but graduated. And we're in a college of computing, so that made us look fantastic, because if they didn't graduate in computer science, they graduated in software information systems. So the pattern that you see of departments being feeders to each other, computing as being sort of always the one that bleeds students out. They ended up in our other degree, so we won anyway. So, but the university has standardized that report to 4 and 6 years. So we have a good IT AR group, so I sort of trust their numbers. But I'm with Tracy. Sometimes the numbers you're like, that doesn't make any sense. So for us, it's transfer students. We got a lot of transfer students, and it's really complicated to understand them because they show up as juniors. So sometimes the juniors, you're like, where are all these people from? But then they don't graduate for too long because they have to take 4 years of CS classes. So
thank you. I'm glad, not glad that you have the same issues, but it's at least comforting to know that it's not just an issue here.
Yeah, well, the good news is there's lots of other data you can collect and analyze and do something about. So maybe the 4-year graduation rate is not something you can really tackle at your institution, but there's lots of other things that you could work on.
And I'll paste in the chat. I didn't want my data subcommittee to spend the whole time talking about what data they were going to collect. And so I was like, you can collect one of these 15 things, because I've seen whole BPC committees spend multiple years talking about how they're going to measure retention. And I think I've seen a lot of BPC committees not do anything because they want to do the perfect thing.
And they're really nasty little details that you don't think about. So for us was when they change the major, we don't know. They declare another major, and in some report they show up as another major, but it's not like they have to ask permissions to drop our major. So the point when they disappear from the major was really difficult to track. And we spent, like Colleen said, we spent like a year collecting data, and found out that the students that were dropping the major particularly women, were doing fine in the intro courses. They were getting A's and B's, and then not take a CS class for a year and then change the major. So they were shopping around to see what major to change to. But by the time we got the form and the notification, they were no longer a major. It was too late because they already have been taking classes in other places. And by looking at the grades, we couldn't tell, because it's not like they were flunking the classes, they were doing well. So if you wanted to pinpoint that, there is just no way to find it. So there's just some really, things that you think would be obvious that are impossible to detect.
Yeah, I just want to say, sorry.
Go ahead,
Tracy.
Diane. I was just going to say that, okay, so I'm going to go ahead since I'm still on this point. Retention is a really hard one, in how you define it, because is it really not retained if the student, for example, leaves your institution and goes and studies computer science somewhere else? That's not a bad thing, right? As long as they're staying in CS. So you have to think about how you want to define retention and then stick with that. And I'm going to stick a link to a report that I know some of you are quite aware of that came out through ACM a few years ago, talking specifically about the challenge of undergrad retention in computing.
I was just going to say, and this goes not only for your data collection activities, but for your activities generally, particularly in the project plan. There is no need to do everything. You don't have to collect all the data. It's more impactful for your department to identify a scope of things that you need to know that you think are a problem. As readers and reviewers, we don't need to see, we sometimes call them the kitchen sink review. It doesn't have to be like that. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Okay, it looks like Colleen answered Gary's question because that is a good question. We did some qualitative effort when we were looking at the experiences of our students. So we did, some group meetings.
Anu?
Yeah, I was wondering, what about job placement data? Just in some preliminary exploring of our numbers, I've seen, quite a few of our students, even if they graduate, don't end up necessarily in CS appropriate positions. Some get what I would think are more like IT positions, and some are completely outside of a tech field at all. Would tracking those kind of numbers to say that, would that fit within a BPC plan to say we would get better job placements be appropriate?
I think that's a very reasonable, you have a sort of sniff test that it might be a problem, and then you collect data to figure out if it is a problem, and then you design strategies to try and address the problem. That seems very impactful. One of my hypotheses is that our students from underrepresented groups have such a miserable time interacting with these tech companies, through these super intense interviews, that then they're like, no, actually, I don't belong. And so I think we might have a good number of students from groups underrepresented in computing who were able to get them to graduate, but they're like, peace out, computing. You were a jerk during this time. I don't want to work at these tech companies. I think we might have some sort of hidden attrition there. So yes, and if you collect that data, can you send it to me? Because I think we might have a problem there.
Sure.
We have a couple of colleagues here that have raised that issue, and we asked the office that does that data for us is Career Services, and they have been collecting data and they have an operation and all that. I think the race variable was added a year ago or 2 years ago. So it's we have 1 year the data, which is hardly much to make a decision. But we have some people that suspect something similar to what Colleen is saying, that they're graduating, particularly the underrepresented students, but they're not getting the lucrative computing jobs. They're just doing sort of okay jobs. So check your career services offices. They might already have some of that data.
And I do think we're having a conversation in the chat too about what do we mean by computing? And I think we mean it all. It's big tent, everybody's in it. We don't want you to switch subfields or fields because it was so toxic where you were. So we might be real sad if you move around computing, this big tent computing, because we pushed you out from some subset. But I do think we want to celebrate participation in any of the various roles, as long as we weren't a jerk to you. Do you know what I mean? So that's how I think about it. And, I previously worked at Harvey Mudd College. And so I was like, oh my goodness, you don't want to do computing? You're going to be a physicist? And I'm like, cool. I don't care. Do you know what I mean? That seems great. As long as you didn't leave because we were mean and uninclusive, then I'm happy for you to find physics as a passion. And all of my students at Harvey Mudd were staying in STEM. So.
Yeah, I'll add to that. And this. Go ahead, Tracy.
Go ahead, Luther.
I'll add to that and this comment that Carla just mentioned here in the chat. Right, we don't want to chase people away. We want to be welcoming. We want to be inclusive. We don't want to be a problem. We don't want to force people's decisions. Right, people can still make their own decisions. People can leave computing for valid personal reasons. We just don't want to be part of a problem.
Actually, let me say something to that because it connects to the data collection. We had a lot of issues with people who do dual majors because the system is not set up to report them. They don't want to report a student twice, even though they're getting 2 majors. So sometimes the first major that they declared is the one that gets reported. So the counting, like Tracy was saying, wasn't counting people that discovered computing in their 3rd semester, declare a major or a minor, and it wouldn't show up in our numbers. And we're like, we graduated 200. Why are you saying 150? You know, and it was a lot of those dual majors that you just had to literally generate all the reporting. Like, he's one of ours. He's one of ours. He's one of ours. So the idea of the whatever you call it, CS plus X, X plus CS, all these computational things that are sort of on the periphery, it's going to make some of these more interesting. And I think it's a win anyway, but I think it's you might want to be aware of that, because you don't want your numbers to go down and bioinformatics to go up. You win if they're both together, but if you don't look at those numbers, you might be looking at the wrong thing.
And I think just like the NSF has a definition of what groups count as underrepresented in computing, size at the NSF also has a definition of like what counts as computing, sort of I think it still is pretty nebulous and broadly defined of like, you know, fields or sub areas that could submit size proposals. Jeff, does that sound right? And so I think user experience could submit size proposals, and things we might reasonably call computing could submit size proposals.
All right, I just wanted to make sure Barrett's comment about getting our students into PhD programs isn't lost, and to give a shout out to the CRA DREW program for distributed REU programs. So if anyone's not familiar with that program, please do a quick search, or maybe someone could post in chat the link and encourage your students to join that program, because we definitely need more people going into PhD programs as well.
And DREW applications are open now too, just in case.
And I'll add another thing. I mean, a lot of universities have early entry or 3+2, or they have different names. We have very few of the communities that we're talking about that stick around that extra year. And I've been sort of saying, this is a really easy way for us to have more grad students that we can count with a 1 year commitment of funding. It's not PhD, but we're starting, get them a master's degree, right? I've seen people recommend that women get a master's degree because with 2 degrees, you start closing the gap, with salaries. It's the same thing with underrepresented minorities. If you can get them to stay 1 more year under an early entry and you pay them a master's tuition, a GTA, they were just taking the classes 2 years ago. Now they serve as role models to the 1 2 years before. And you pay them so it doesn't cost them money. It's a win-win situation. So we're trying to explore that a little bit more intentional with women and Black and Latinos to stick around. A lot of them don't. A lot of them just run, get their job, and disappear. It's like 1 more year. Come on, get a master's degree. Help us, because then you help at least, diversify the TA pool, if nothing else.
So Jeff, there's a question in the chat. Can you paste the link to that NSF call that's about getting students who have graduated to go back and get a PhD? I don't have that link handy, and there's another question in the chat. Tracy, what were you going to say?
I was going to answer Jane's question in the chat. If you are not able to get your plan verified before that December deadline, what I would do, and maybe other people have suggestions, is I would share the current version of my departmental plan with your faculty, and they can pull out pieces and put that into their individual plan. So you're still saving them time by doing that.
And I love how many people posted CS Grad for US. It's a super awesome program that you should check out and encourage all your alums that you're in contact with to apply for. And I also pasted a link to the standalone project BPC plans. There are examples listed there in that on that page that your PIs can just copy and paste and then edit their name and add a little bit of institutional data. So we try and make it, there are 6 example standalone project plans that they could copy and paste and submit to the NSF. I think we also saw a link to the GEMS fellowships. So if you haven't seen those, they're not CS specific, but are also applicable. If folks don't know, there's also funding sources. If you have more than 200 undergraduate graduates per year, I think you're eligible for funding from the Center for Inclusive Computing. We can paste a link to that in the chat. UIUC was able to apply for funding to enact a bunch of BPC focused on increasing the representation of women in our undergraduate degree programs.
Jeff, you want to answer the question about eligibility?
In the program in 2021, students who had completed a 4+1 program would be ineligible. We are thinking about options for next year, so I would look around the new year to see what the new program looks like.
And to give a quick shout out, thank you, Luther, for putting in the CIC link. If you're pretty new to this whole collecting data and analyzing what's happening at your institution, there's actually funding available through that program for collecting and analyzing your data. That might be helpful. Julie?
I think I was just curious also around any strategies around leveraging sort of existing activities versus new ones and how that would potentially be judged. So I can imagine if we've already done a lot of activities and our plan only includes sort of like new things that we're doing, I can imagine reviewers saying like, well, they're not doing some of these basic things, but they're things we've already done. So does your plan ever include like sort of things or include things you've already done or whatnot, as opposed to always new things? So just kind of trying to think of that balance there.
I
think, go ahead, Colleen.
As consultants, I think we might give you advice, but not, oh, you're not doing some of these very basic things. You have to do them. But we might, as trying to help everybody do a good job of BPC, recommend them. I think if there are things that faculty can get involved in your department plan, I would list them old or new, just to give faculty more opportunities to get plugged in.
Yeah, so like we already have like a really active diversity, equity, inclusion committee, for example, right? And so I wouldn't put like form a committee because we already have that. So like, okay, yeah. So I'm just wondering if there's a way to kind of capture things we've already are doing well at as part of our plans.
But somebody being on the committee could
be. So yeah, or maybe like increasing participation in that existing committee or something would be an example. So.
Even just being an active member on that committee seems awesome.
You could also mention strengths in your context.
Oh, right. Yeah, there's that context statement. Awesome. Thank you.
We're getting into the last few minutes, but feel free to still raise your hand or ask your questions in the chat.
I have another really quick question as well too. Well, the floor's quiet. I was curious, I haven't gone through all the statistics yet on the BPCnet site, which sounds great, but I'm curious just if I would find something around sort of culture or a measure for like culture or climate as like a survey. Is there a survey question or something like that we can include to assess that?
The BPCnet, go ahead. Go you, Tracy.
Well, I was going to mention the NCWIT student experience of the major has some questions that you can pull out to take a look at culture. What were you going to say, Colleen? There's also something different, a link in my slides for faculty, but I think you're asking about students. Colleen, what were you going to say?
Oh, I just pasted the link to the NCWIT student experience of the major SEM survey, but also SERP, you can have SERP do data buddies collection for you where they send you the link, you collect the data, they send you a report. But if you want to do something smaller, 4 questions or something, I think the NCWIT one is a good one to pull a few questions from.
Okay. So we are going to wrap up here in a minute, but what we want to do is we have a quick poll, 2 questions, because we like collecting data, of course, to ask you your opinions about the working session. So if, here we go. We would really appreciate if you could fill that out. And while you do that, I also want to thank everybody again. Thanks our speakers, Colleen and Luther for recording the videos, all of our consultants being here with us. Jeff, also thank you for joining and answering the questions that we could not have answered without you. Please also, if you have any more questions, feel free to make an appointment on bpcnet.org with a consultant, or you can email bpcinfo@cra.org as well. We'll try to help you in any way we can. So that's what we had. Thanks for joining us.